Okay, we're on. Welcome everyone to the last Resilience Live session. I'm here, well, my name is Victor Galaz. I work here at the Stockholm Resilience Center as Deputy Science Director. And with me I have
Carl Folke, and I'm also here at the Stockholm Resilience Center in a place called the Bayer Institute, Stockholm.
Yeah, and I think we're going to spend a little bit, around an hour here to ask your questions. And I have a little list here. So let's get started. Okay, Carl.
Okay.
So here's the first one. How frequent do we need to build resilience? Can we assume that something that it stays once it's built, or how should we follow up?
Yeah, I think you can't just build it once and then everything is fine. You have a continuous learning process. Sometimes you need to strengthen parts of resilience, and other times you would like to get rid of resilience when you're on the wrong path. But it's a matter of understanding the world you're in and adjusting to it continuously, I think. There's no sort of fixed blueprint solutions that you just can implement and everything is fine and you forget about it. It's a moving target with continuous adaptation.
Mm.
How would you like to implement that?
Of course, I agree with you. I mean, it's embedded in the whole notion of resilience that it's a dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic concept. It's something that you need to nurture all the time. I mean, you would talk about sources of resilience,
Absolutely.
right? So what would be the sources of resilience that we need to keep
Well,
track?
the sources are, of course, experiences and competences and skills. And I think what's really happening when you use resilience for development is that you can connect experiences and skills that have not been connected before. And often then innovation happens. And you can take on new challenges and new pathways based on those combinations.
Mm. So there's another related question here that I saw, and that has to do with what resilience thinking contributes to discussions about sustainable development. Here, for example, it says, is resilience thinking pushing us towards a new paradigm where we celebrate ingenuity and the potential to achieve large-scale positive change because we acknowledge that humanity is intimately connected to the environment? So do you see that happen? So that's part of resilience thinking.
Absolutely. So I would argue that I think resilience is particularly different from sustainable development because we're looking at the world as complex and complex adaptive system and not as a steady state feature that you can map and create indicators for easily. But resilience, as you know, as you heard throughout this MOOC, is really about having the capacity to live with change, and especially being able to deal with unplanned change or even surprises. So it's a feature of dealing with complex systems and not just a world that is predictable.
Mm. Okay, so very good questions. So maybe on the same topic that we just got a question about applications of resilience principles into enterprise and business. So we talked about the properties of resilience and sources of resilience. Has there been any work on applying resilience thinking in business?
I think a lot of businesses are implicitly applying resilience just by staying alive with moving markets and new technologies developing. So I think business world is perhaps more prone to implicitly have resilience as part of their organizational structure if you want to stay alive. That doesn't mean that it is sustainable in any way, but of course, but they operate like in an environment that is continuously changing. We have a lot of work. We are working increasingly with businesses with the purpose to try to redirect several businesses and sectors to become stewards of our future on the planet instead of just using the planet for business purposes, and especially there's an effort called CBOS now with about 10 major transnational companies that operate in the oceans, where we are developing everything from practical measures like transparency and traceability issues in companies to removal of antibiotics to more visionary things of becoming stewards for healthy oceans, simply for the reasons that these businesses are dependent on healthy oceans for seafood production. And that involves putting pressure on the climate challenge, putting pressure on ocean acidification, putting pressure on plastics and pollution of our oceans.
No, see, it's almost like we're in the middle of a shift, maybe within. I mean, at least you see that in the business community, but also, for example, with people in the finance sector, that you start going away from seeing the environment or ecology as a reputational risk. You're doing bad things and you get bad reputation, to what they call material risk. But suddenly you realize that if you're not integrating and understanding how the biosphere operates, what climate change and loss of biodiversity and water resources would mean, it will actually cost your business if you're a corporate actor, or it will cost you investments if you're a financial actor. So it is a bit of the change from reputational to material risk. But maybe there's something also that you sometimes talk about, a shift in values in society, maybe also.
Absolutely. So what Victor is talking about now, I think, is what you also talked about earlier, the great acceleration, that if you go back 50, 60, 70 years, there was those constraints from healthy ecosystems were not as obvious. But now they are, because of the saturation points that they have reached for the planet. So I think the biggest shift that have happened in the last 20 years or so is that we have moved from an idea that the environment is outside society or something you bring in occasionally into development agendas, to really realize that it's not about saving the environment, it's about our own future as part of the planet, whether we will be able to develop everything on Earth that humans are engaged with in a good way or not. So that dimension, I think, is profoundly important, and that's now visible strongly in the operation of companies, that it's becoming a necessity to, as part of the strategic development, to account for healthy environments in business models. And it has to do, of course, with value shift. I think it's we're right now going out of the industrial phase into more of something new. We think we're in a renaissance of finding sustainable pathways for all of humans on Earth. And that's a big challenge, but it seems like there is a big search for that. You can see there's a lot of thought leaders coming out with new type of visions for the future, but also has the planet as part of it, actually, which was not the case if you go back 20, 30 to 40 years ago. And I think that's a major issue for the whole development field, to have all humans poor and rich as part of that journey.
I think that follows on very nicely into another question that we have here about peace and security, right? So it says here, what role does peace, crime, and security within social ecological system dynamics? Can we link the environment within peace practices? I think it sort of connects to that. I mean, so the way I look at it when we interact with that community is, first of all, part of the solutions to avoid conflict is of course to become better stewards of the biosphere. I mean, there are some people call it nature-based solutions, or making sure that, I mean, agriculture provides food security to people around the world, etc. I mean, you can think about that, but then there's also the very long-term perspective, is that if we're not clever in the next decades in how we manage our lands, our climate, our oceans, there will be more instability and security instability in the world. I think Jessica Spiker's work on marine conflicts and how marine conflicts are likely to increase and move around the planet is a very clear indication, an early warning. Absolutely. That this is a dangerous future.
So therefore, I think resilience thinking and resilience building is a way to approach peace issues also, because ideally, I guess all of us would like humans to be able to operate up to between 9 and 11 billion with dignity and under peaceful circumstances. So I think what Victor has talked about, nature-based solutions, we try to emphasize that there is no nature and no society by themselves anymore. It's really intertwined now. It's the era of the Anthropocene. So whether we like it or not, or whether we care about the environment or not, we're already intertwined with it. And that's more. The more we understand about those connections, the more likelihood there is for developing pathways that can be sustainable.
Good. Okay, we're going to scroll down a bit. Let's see. We talked about peace already. Okay, this is a tough one about applications and measurements. Let's hear your thoughts on that. Many people argue that one of the biggest challenges of resilience practice is how hard it is to measure. How do you as practitioners deal with this challenge, and can we measure resilience results and applications? I think, I would say, in our community, there are probably different streams of thought, right? Some people are very, very keen on measuring some aspects of resilience and to do that systematically and across domains and systems. Whereas I would say there's another group of people in our community that would say that actually there are very few hard measures of resilience. There are principles, and then the applications of principles will lead you to ask new questions and come up with other sort of metrics that would fit to that system that you're interested in, right? Because when we talk about resilience, we talk about the resilience of what to what and at what scale. So it becomes very difficult to have metrics that you can run across any system, any scale, at any time. So I would say we have those, not tensions, but two different traditions within the resilience community.
And I think it has to do with also if you address resilience in the shorter term or in the longer term also. So if it's really about dealing with a disaster or assessing your portfolio of ecosystem services, then of course there's a lot of indicators and measures you can use to do that. But the question really becomes how do you manage and govern? How do you manage those, and how do you govern people and societies and businesses that are involved in those under changing conditions? And that's where it becomes more difficult to have sort of fixed resilience measures when those things happen. But there are a lot of work, everything from very theoretical work to very practical work on measuring resilience. And the theoretical, of course, is to try to figure out how close you are to thresholds and tipping points. And there's a lot of work there on early warnings and critical slowing down and this type of more theoretical work. But then you have the more practical portfolios of who producing understanding of the situations you're in with a lot of other actors and then learning on your way, which is what resilience assessments or wayfinder and these type of approaches.
Yeah, I think that's very useful. You sort of picked it up sometimes. There is a misconception that there is something called resilience theory emerging from pure theory, and then you move into space and then you drop theory bombs on people, which is actually not what we do. I think resilience thinking has evolved a combination between theory and very on the ground work, and that has sort of enriched each other for the decades.
I think basically it emerged from observations, from understanding the world. And if you go back to how it really developed, so it was not a clean, perfect theory how to do things. On the contrary, it's very bottom-up driven the way it has developed, because it came from child psychology on the one hand, where people studied why different kids from the same family could deal better with disturbances than others, these type of things. And it came from ecology, where people realized that ecosystems have different development pathways, and this is the way it works. So that's why I think for many people the theory also has been a bit fuzzy in the sense that it's interpreting reality actually, and not the other way around. But I think this distinction that we have in the theory of persistence, adaptability, and transferability are important to think about when we're dealing with resilience and applying resilience, because some of the resilience practices, of course, are about adaptations and dealing with more short-term immediate needs to be able to persist and to exist. But others are really about shifting hopefully into better futures, and that requires other types of indicators and assessments.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. Let's see. What else do we have? So, okay. What about this is interesting. We will discuss this a little about the circular economy. All right. So this is a big question, but it's interesting. Is the circular economy the answer to transform the industrialized system? What about the vulnerable period along the path to achieve it in the circular economy? I don't know. We had a little bit of discussion.
Well, I can give my take on that. The circular economy, I think, is a new term for a lot of work that was done in the 70s and 80s by scholars like Golding and Herman Daly and others. So we're talking about the throughput economy and the recycling economy, these type of things. And of course, it's a matter of using what you have in a more efficient way. But resilience is not necessarily part of the circular economy thinking. I think it's more of being more efficient. And actually, already in the 80s, I think the World Business Council for Sustainable Development had a very strong focus on circular thinking and recycling, and when they started out with the Schmidt-Heine's work. So it happens to be a concept now that is used in more the practice and political arena, but it's been with us for a long time, and I think it is, in my mind, it's not sufficiently dynamic to deal with the changing circumstances we're entering right now. It's an important subset of improving resource use and energy use and recycling, but it does not necessarily solve the future.
Yeah, no, I think I agree on that. That's been my reflection as well. I mean, when we engage with people in the business sector or entrepreneurs or something else, I think normally what we're thinking about is what I would call it, like a biosphere positive economy look like.
Yeah.
So an economy that grows, and at the same time as it grows, it would create ecosystem services and improve biodiversity and remove carbon emissions, for example. So I think less of an efficiency paradigm, but more of a let's increase the safe operating space at the same time as the economy grows. And I think we're not really there yet, of course, but some companies are thinking in that way. I think you can see that at least some Swedish companies, like when you consume our product, it's going to have a positive impact on the biosphere, not just reduce something, will have a positive impact. I think that's the kind of discussion we need to have.
And I think there's an enormous state opening up now also, because we are sort of in a new type of revolution. We already seen it to some extent with information technology and just how that has changed in the last 20 years. But we're moving into new dimensions here with artificial intelligence and many other dimensions. That of course will change social behavior and relations among people. And the opportunity there is really to combine that development with, as Victor has said, with good stewardship of the planet, so we really can avoid a lot of unnecessary tensions and conflicts that will arise if we don't do that.
I think there's kind of a big space there for innovation in a sense, right? And new business models, or whatever word you want to use, that shift in thinking on how we become stewards. That's actually opportunities to create new ways of doing business and investing and consuming, etc.
But I think it's also going all the way to social innovations and shift in value systems. And I think we are witnessing those type of shifts right now, as more or less as we speak, I think. What else do we have for interesting questions?
So I would say here, so let's change gear a bit. So this one. So fully entering the Anthropocene, there are extremely difficult times ahead. Are there resilient skills you see most useful for surviving those challenges? What are resilient skills? What would that be? Complexity thinking, or?
I think it is we often say to expect the unexpected, to be prepared for that, not to. In those situations, it's of course if you really try to be super efficient in everything you do and maximize how you use resources, then you become so efficient that when change happens, you can't really deal with it. That's one part of it. The other one I think is really about the connected world. How connected can it be? And because if you go into situations of big change, and if you're too connected, then everything will influence everything basically. And that's I think I raised that a little bit in one of the talks, the tension between modularity and connectivity, basically that you can do your own thing but still be connected, but then disconnect when needed.
Yeah, I think there's something I really agree with you there on the issue of preparing or expecting surprise. And how to manage surprise. I think that goes back to the question about measurement. That measuring something gives you a sense of control, when in fact, when a surprise hits you, it's going to be on something that you haven't measured and you didn't know you should measure. And one parallel will probably be in the health community, like in the global health community and epidemic governance. Like everyone was waiting for the avian flu in Asia and monitoring what's sort of trying to pick up the avian flu in Asia, whenever that was coming. Of course, the big shock was not the avian flu in Asia, it was swine flu in North America, and so that came up as a surprise, and you had to respond to that. That's just a result of these multiple connections and possibilities for surprise from along.
So I think that one of the tricky things for the Anthropocene is that these type of responses now must be more coordinated across nations than before, because of the scale that we are operating at now as a globalized world, which is a new thing for development challenges. Do you have anything?
Something like that. So again, this goes back. Well, we can take that again. So on the application gap. So what are the goals and tactics to address the application gap between practical application of resilience thinking and resilience research in addressing the need for transformation of societies and lifestyles for the sake of global sustainability? So is there an application gap? Probably yes, we would agree, right? I mean, there's a lot of thinking and insights in the work done by our colleagues that's just not being applied.
But I think that the application, the insights that, or the theory that has developed is from observation. So we've been looking at a lot of things that have been going on the ground or in the real world. And out of that, drawing out the principles and drawing out the governance challenges. So it's not coming out of thin air, something like that. It's really based on studying carefully what is going on in many places on Earth, actually. And so the application gap is more of what is the toolbox we can use to apply resilience, more than lack of resilience practice in the real world, I would say.
But is it also a matter? I mean, some of the things that it's also a matter that so resilience thinking is a slightly different way of thinking about the world and what sort of interventions that will work, and in some aspect that means that you need to do things differently, right? I mean, so there will be a bit of pushback also if you, for example, if you propose, like if you govern a forest or agriculture, like no, you should actually govern for redundancy and diversity, which is sort of a little bit in conflict with optimization.
Absolutely. So what you should avoid, I think, in general now, is to develop large-scale single-species production systems. Because when we are in the Anthropocene with climate change and other changes, they don't have any backups in them. Actually, they are very sensitive to change. So that could be one principle in some right, not to simplify things, but make sure that you have, as Victor just said, sufficient amount of redundancy and or response diversity, we call it also. Not just ecologically, but also socially. So you have diverse options. You don't invest everything you have in one basket. You diversify your baskets. And some of that may be costly, of course, to keep that redundancy alive. But on the other hand, when you're hit by the surprise, you'll be really happy that you have it. And when we looked at cultures who had survived for thousands of years, several thousands of years, without capital markets and fossil fuel-based technology, and in all of those cultures, we discovered that there was a lot of redundancy, both socially and ecologically, built into those systems, to be able to deal with changing circumstances.
Okay, that's good. I think just as another reflection on this application gap, I think if I just think about how the field has evolved, say the last decade, and the skill sets that people have, I think there is even in individuals, there's much more of a capacity to do both the science and engage, and get involved in co-production processes and have a dialogue with whether it's entrepreneurs or NGOs or business, that even individuals are embedding that skill set nowadays.
Absolutely. And as part of that skill set, then it's really the reason for engaging in those collaborative processes is not that it's just pleasant or just, it's really about sharing competences and skills and building capacity to deal with changing circumstances. So you are moving, when you do that, you start a journey of recognizing that you're living with a moving target all the time. And you need to mobilize what you know, what you understand, to make good decisions when you're faced with a moving target. And that's where we see risk becomes really obvious now among big companies. That is really high on the agenda now, to really not just apply a certain view of the world in your strategies, but really assess and monitor this moving target around you in new ways.
This is a related question. So it says here, are there examples of national level approaches to resilience? At what level is it most effective to put resilience in practice? That's a tricky one, right? I think, I mean, like in general, you can assume a nation could do like a national resilience assessment, but to be honest, on the same way, that's not really the application you would like to see, because it's a multi-level property, right? I mean, even at a state level, there's so many connections with other countries, with other systems, that sort of a national application of resilience thinking would be too limiting in a sense. What do you say? Is that even possible or useful?
Yeah, I think it could be, the assessment perhaps should not be at the national level, but it could be done by nations, of course. So I'm thinking about the case when we work in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, that's the reflection of Australia taking on the challenge of trying to deal with the coral reefs faced with climate change challenges. They were fishing. That was really sort of from the local up to the national level, and with politicians and other leaders at that national scale engage with local groups, try to completely shift the governance structure into a new direction. So that could be an example of it. And I would argue some of those examples exist at global levels also, like the work Henrik Östrom has done on the Southern Oceans, and the illegal and unreported fishing there was really about local agents or local people elsewhere getting upset by the whole thing, and out of that networks and institutions developed that connected up to the global level convention, Camelot Convention, which now succeeds to curb illegal unreported fishing in the southern oceans. And it's really an example of a dynamic adaptive governance structure at the global level that can deal with the regional resource. So I don't think resilience thinking is constrained by the local or the global, but it's really the interaction across the levels that are critical for resilience thinking. And I think that's obvious now also when we deal with the new development challenges in the Anthropocene, is that the local is, of course, hardly ever local anymore. It's really shaped by the scale much more than before.
I think I agree with you. So that's why there's something when you want to do these sort of assessment that actually might make more sense to go global to the local and then go local to the global. Like, for example, the World Economic Forum reports on connected risks, and then scaling them down. But then also you can think about a local issue, say water, food security, and then look at the connections up to the global through global world food markets or climate change, whatever, to do that. The thing with the national level, though, and here's my political scientist coming in, is that the national level is very powerful from a governance perspective. I mean, this is where the action happens. In a sense, it has resources, it has mandates. So I guess a resilience analysis, my gut feeling should be global to local, local to global, but action on the national.
Absolutely, action on the national, but would you make a national resilience assessment?
Probably not.
Scale of the nation.
No,
so that's why I meant also that.
Yeah, no, probably not.
The national is really important, but exactly because that's the power. That's where you can make regulations and create incentives and use taxes and all these things. But it has to connect to the local level, and perhaps also to the global level, because few nations operate by themselves. They are connected in other consortium, whether it's free trade or political agreements.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, there's a lot of literature on that sort of mismatch between national boundaries and the operation of governance at the national level and the actual dynamics of the problems that we're facing are not national. Okay. Let's see. They're all good questions. So we talked about peace already. I'm going to remove that. Do you want to talk about health a little bit?
We can try to do that.
Okay. So what is your advice to start a career in resilience thinking? Is the possibility in the area of health sciences? I mean,
I think that's an enormously timely thing to do right now, actually, because there's a lot of efforts and talk about combining what people are talking about as global health and planetary health. A lot of efforts, and often food has been used as a bridge. Think about for those issues. But I think resilience lens on health. For example, if you have things like resistance, antibiotic resistance, or resistance to pesticides, and these type of things, is a direct reflection of thinking about it in resilience terms. So what has happened there is basically that we try to solve a problem in the short term, that required antibiotics, which has created a longer term feedback back to human society now at the global scale, which is pretty scary in many respects, actually. But that's a direct application of resilience thinking, where you have actors doing a lot of things that then leads to pattern at higher scales, which then feeds back to the actors. How do you deal with that? That's one dimension of the health issue, but another one is really to combine this challenge of global health, which is often thought about right now as health within us as humans, how healthy we feel and are at the global scale, and combining that with planetary health, which is really about stewardship of our own future as part of the biosphere. And that's a wide open field, but it's rapidly emerging now, actually. So if you're interested in that domain, I think it'd be very timely to move into that.
There's also the whole field on eco-health,
Absolutely.
is related.
Yes.
Looking at the interplay between humans and ecology in creating challenges for human health. But it's
another dimension of the health, of course, is psychological health. So there are several research groups now who are looking at the role of ecosystem services in green areas in city development, for example, and what it means for psychological well-being. It's been shown that psychological well-being really increases when you have more greener space around you, which is of course extremely important given that we already live 60% of the human population in urban areas and probably going to build more urban areas than we have today, in the future, and especially in Africa. So I think that dimension is a really important one that has not been sufficiently appreciated. Another one is of course health in terms of having meaning in your life, what generates meaning for you, and so you don't fall into depression, being depressed, and that rate of suicides, which really has increased a lot now among younger people actually. And I think that meaning creation is very important, and there's a lot of work now on human behavior, human group behavior, and what are the imagined orders that are created among people for creating meaning. And I think there's an enormous potential to connect that to what this book is about. Really to connect it back to how we can be stewards of our own future as part of the planet, and using a resilience lens for addressing those type of challenges.
Yeah, and I think maybe we should mention that too, like all the work that our colleagues in the looking at urban,
Exactly.
they call it what they're realizing, how closely ecology, social well-being, and health go hand in hand.
Yes.
And there's actually a lot of co-benefits.
Yes.
If you design cities and think about city planning in a clever way, you can actually have these benefits together.
Absolutely.
That's exciting. Okay, so that was health sciences. I think this you will like. One of your good topics. How could religious beliefs be incorporated in resilience thinking for transformational development in Anthropocene? How do we use religion as a tool to propel sustainable development? We thought about that a bit.
It's not an easy one.
I'm a bit agnostic, so.
That's a tricky one, of course, but religions, you can look at religious beliefs in different ways, but I think that you could look at religions as really deep norms and rules or guiding principles or something like that for humans, and I think that in this new renaissance we are forming new type of guiding principles that may be connected to conventional religions, but also may generate new forms of belief systems, and that's happening right now, I think, actually in different ways. If you take the Swedish church, for example, it has really reassessed its messages and now connect them strongly to the planet in climate challenges. Actually, we have the Pope, who last week had a big meeting with industrial leaders to really take on strategically the climate challenge. So what I'm saying is that religion is already doing that. Religious leaders are already taking on those challenges, perhaps currently more in the climate domain, but I think more and more broadly for the whole planet's future. But it may not be enough. It may be that we also need another type of cosmology for our species to guide us. And I'm thinking that's sort of happening. What I'm saying, what I think is happening right now is that the realization that we are not, that the environment and the planet is not something outside society, but really the realization that we are now embedded in the planet and dependent on its function. It's a big shift, of course. And of course, those type of views you had in the cultures before. I think it's part of the sustainability challenge that these type of norms and way of relating to your to your existence and the meaning emerges in situations of scarcity. So I think that's where we are right now.
I think I remember when the notion of the Anthropocene began and entered the public discourse, and you saw that sort of reasoning of rethinking the way we relate to each other and to nature and to future generations.
Yeah.
And so I think that got a bit lost, I think, in the last years, but I think it opened up at least for that new way of thinking, as you mentioned.
Yeah, so it depends on what type of goal you have for humanity. If you really think that we should be 9 to 11 billion people in some type of just societies that can operate in a peaceful way, then of course we have to do this. Others may have other views of the future of humanity, that we should reduce humanity to perhaps 1 billion or something like that. But those are not the views at least the two of us are having.
Okay. I think there are 2 good questions here that are related. Should we do one more? One last.
Okay.
Last question. So let's talk about SDGs. In 2018, the Sustainable Development Goals stand as a transformative agenda. What are the advancements made so far in the aim of fulfilling them, and what should happen next?
That's a small
What's
one.
your take on that?
Well, I think what's really critical with the SDGs was that they brought in the biosphere more explicitly if you compare them to the MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, that we had before. And connected the development and well-being between the goals, actually, more than had been done before. So it's interesting to see how a lot of different actors, from local communities to municipalities to big companies, are using the SDG as guiding, some type of guiding principles, actually. So I was at a conference for seafood development, something called Aquavision, on Wednesday in Stavanger, where there were 450 companies from 45 countries, and SDGs were up there in several talks, actually, in that conference. So I think it's interesting to note how I think it has gained much more traction than I thought it would when it came out, actually.
Yeah, I'm also surprised about how much SDGs are talked about. I mean, in terms of what should happen next, one of the things that might worry me a little bit about the SDGs, first of all, just the sheer number, and then that some people or whatever you want might just pick a few of them. Like, yeah, I'm going to do goal 9, that's my goal, and then failing to see all the relations between many of these goals. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that we always talk about, and it's probably also in the MOOC, the bit of layering between the SDGs. The way we normally show them would be with the biosphere as the basis, and then the other SDGs coming on top.
Yes.
Recognizing that without a stable biosphere, climate, oceans, biodiversity, it's going to be very hard to reach the other goals. And sometimes that message gets lost. It's the SDG machinery is so big, and then there's an opportunity for actors to sort of cherry pick what they see, what fits what they're doing already, that I'm afraid that we might lose momentum. But I mean, I'm also optimistic, though. I'm also positively surprised.
Positive about it, but of course what's missing in it, which is not surprising, but it's the whole dimension of making use of change, actually, because it's not embedded in that structure. And that's of course the core of this whole MOOC, is really how you have capacity to live with change, and really to make use of windows of opportunities that are opening up for improving the situation. I think that dimension is not really part of the way the SDGs have been set up.
So as a last word then, we want an SDG for windows of opportunity, navigating windows of opportunity. Okay, that's good. I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you for all your questions. It was good to talk to you, Carl.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for nice questions.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.